everyone, it's Brenda Miller. I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, and I go live every Wednesday at 5 o'clock to share with you some things that are going on at Stampin' Up! And things I'm working on and all the good stamping stuff. So today is no exception. I'm using some new products from our new catalog and also piggybacking onto a video that I saw today on Instagram. Sarah Douglas, who is our CEO, she did a live, and I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I only saw it today. And I put a link to it in the description of this video. But it was a discussion with the designer for one of our suites. And I'm going to use that suite today, and I'm going to tell you some of the things she talked about, but also encourage you to go and watch the whole video if you have a chance, because it was really very interesting. I usually don't have patience for videos. I tend to skim them, but this one I actually watched all the way through. So let's go ahead and make our card for today. So the bundle that we're going to use today is the Impressions Abloom bundle. This gorgeous stamp set also has coordinating dies, and some of them are here, some of them are elsewhere because I'm going to be using them. But you can see that all of these pieces come with it, along with the stamp that you can see the images up here. So lots of really great uses. And I know everybody says, oh, do we really need some more flowers? But I've got to tell you, this one really takes the cake, I think. It's very versatile. So hopefully you're going to find it that way too. So what happened was I was prepping for a class with my seniors that I have tomorrow and Friday, 2 classes. And I always use retired products with them because I have so much left over always, and so they are very grateful. These are all, I donate the classes and all the supplies. So anyway, I was working with this card and I said, okay, well, I like to use simple designs with them because, a lot of them aren't stampers, or they may be, they may have arthritis in their hands. There are lots of things to consider. We don't like to frustrate them. So I tend to use simple sketches, if you will. And this is one of my go-tos. I love to use different pattern papers. And you can see that this paper was from a celebration, I think, a couple of years ago. And this is actually stripes from our Subtles DSP collection that has just recently retired. It's the Petal Pink. And I said, okay, well, this card was nice by itself, just with because it shows off the paper and everything. But then I said, it needs a little something extra. So I went to my Impressions Abloom because I've been using the flowers on here quite a bit. They just stand alone all by them, so easily. And they'll be able to just put these on with a dimensional and they'll be thrilled. I do pre-cut them for them. That's a little much for them. So anyway, so I said, okay, well, here's a simple card. And I watched the video that Sarah had and I said, wow, I just made an easy card, and let's go ahead and play with our Impressions Abloom and go to the DSP that goes with it. And one of the things that they talked about, these are sample pages of the DSP. And so each one has these flowers on it. And what was interesting, the way that the flowers were designed were to look like dried flowers that are pressed and, more as like ornamentation. And one of the reasons that I can't remember the designer's name. I'm so sorry. Kathleen, maybe? But she said that she created it using these ovals to look like those glass, maybe paperweights or even items that stand like a frame, and then have the dried flowers inside of them. And that was kind of the impetus for the design for this. And so she then designed it so that the flowers looked like they were pressed, right? Dried flowers pressed, but look at all the gorgeous coloring that's in here. This one has the leaves, just really pretty. And she goes into a lot more detail in the video, like I said, if you ever want to watch it. But this is my favorite sheet And so that's, of course, what I decided to use today for this card. So let's go ahead and assemble it, and I'll just show you a couple of tips about it. So super simple. I use this sketch a lot because it highlights designer series paper, and that's usually what I have the most of. And let me tell you something, when I do these cards, they are so impressed and so excited about what they create. And I always say, it's really all about pretty paper. And it's taking that paper and just putting it onto a card. So what I did was, this is actually the same sheet of paper, and it's the two sides. And so I looked at the paper and I said, well, what are the colors that we have in it? And I did look at the back of the package. It does tell you the colors that are in it. And so I decided to highlight the fresh Freesia, which handily is the back side of this. And then also, this is actually peach pie. So I said, okay, well, I've got some peach pie ribbon, so that it's going to work perfectly. And that's usually how I come up with what I'm going to use on a card. So anyway, so let's go ahead. And I like to build my cards when I'm using ribbon onto a separate panel. So this is just a piece of basic white cardstock. And I'm just going to, and I'm putting the adhesive on here just because it's a little bit easier for me right now. But you see, this goes end to end. You could create it with a little bit of a border if you wanted to, but I just did it end to end, and so that it's completely covering this piece of white cardstock. Okay, and so there we have that. And so we have this seam in the middle, and that's okay because we're going to use our ribbon. And this is the bordered ribbon that comes in all of last year's in colors. They've carried over. They are still available. And this is how I like to teach how to tie this kind of ribbon. It just makes it easier, especially for my seniors, but also for everyone. It's just easier to teach it this way. We cut a piece of ribbon that's a little bit longer than the width of what we're putting it on, okay? And then we're going to turn it over, and we're actually going to put adhesive on the back side. Oops, I got to move it up a little bit. So I don't use a ton of adhesive. This adhesive is very strong, but of course you could use more. But you definitely need 2 stripes, and 1 stripe going down the back of each of, in this case, the shorter sides, okay? And then I'm just wrapping my ribbon around and pressing it right into that adhesive. And I did it so that it was over the seam, so that you don't see that ugly seam in between. And now I also have adhesive left over so that I can stick it right onto my card front. Easy peasy. And because I've been doing it this way for a long time now, everybody really knows how to do this. So we've got our card, okay? So again, it's just a normal A2 size card, a fresh Freesia base, and then I used the white and I built upon it with the designer series paper and then the ribbon to go around. Now let's go ahead and go over to our sentiment, because this card looks great just the way it is. So let's have it say something. So I do love the way that they have all these different the sayings, and these are all about thank you, really. I appreciate you, thanks, and then for being there. I think this is my new favorite thanks. Let's find it right here. So it's been on my desk. I've been using it a lot. I just like the way that looks. And I'm going to stamp it onto I'm just considering this a piece of scrap paper. But then I decided, okay, well, I can put so very much. So I mounted that. And then I'm just going to put that right underneath the thanks. Trying to center it the best I can. Try to make it straight, maybe not, but you get the idea. So now that I have that, I also would like to stamp some flowers, just because this punch that I'm going to use, this is the modern oval punch. You can see it's kind of big. I like to use punches when I'm prepping classes because, you know, I have to do every month, you know, lots of cards, and if I'm doing all the prepping work, punches tend to be easier sometimes than using dies all the time, but I do use both. But anyway, so I want to just add a little bit to this, and so what I did was I mounted, this is a flower, so you can see Let me just show you on here. It's this flower, which is going to give the background of the flower, and then this is the detail. So it's a two-step stamping, right? And it's very, very easy to stamp with. But what I do want to do is stamp off. So I just need a piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to stamp using fresh Freesia ink. I'm stamping off onto a piece of scrap paper, and then I'm coming to my sentiment, and I'm going to do two. I'm going to do this one over, I guess over here somewhere. And then I want to add my detail. So I flipped it over, and now I'm using the detail part. And what I like to do is just line up the inside circle. And that tends to line it up just perfectly. You don't really have to worry about getting it exactly right. You probably could, and it might come out better. But I think that looks pretty good, just like that. I'm not going to stamp the inside of this one because I don't want it to take away as much from the sentiment. Now, normally I would stamp 3, but because we're going to be putting another flower on, I'm just doing 2. And so then I'm going to come in with my punch, and I'm going to just punch it out, and there we have a lovely label that we can use. Where is my chat? Just in case anybody's there. Okay, so we've got the thanks so very much, and we're going to put it onto the card over here, and we're going to use dimensionals. And I'm just going to put dimensional at the top and the bottom because I don't want it to go onto the ribbon. I just find that it sits better if it's not right on the ribbon. So let's go ahead and get that on here. And I'm going to move it over because I realized when I did this before that this flower that we're going to die cut is kind of big. So, and I want to be able to put it over there and not get in the way. So let me just talk about how the dies are. So there are a number of different dies that cut out flowers. Here's one of the big ones, and you can also, you'll do the same with the leaves and the centers of the flowers, etc. And these are other kinds of flowers too that you could do. You could stamp them first and then cut them out with the outline, or you could do like I did, which was take the outline stamp and put it onto your paper, and then you're going to take the inside, which is just really, it's cutting it, but not cutting all the way through. And you just lay it on the inside, and look how nicely that fits, and you can, punch out a bunch of these. I did for my Zoom class, which is next week. I did one of the cards doing that, and I pre-cut them. And you'll take it to your die cutting machine, and you're going to end up with this flower here. Okay, so here's the flower. Let me hold it up to the camera, and you can see very forgiving. See how pretty that is? It has all that detail. And I want to put a center on this flower. And normally I would die cut the center, but I managed to lose the very, very tiniest piece of this entire set. I lost just before this live, and so I'm going to have to get some help trying to find it. But I'm going to stamp it instead, which is fine as well. And so I just used some early espresso, and I did that because there was a flower right here. You can see part of it, and that's what it has on the inside. So I was just pulling from the paper itself to decide how much to do. Okay, so now I want to put it on the card, and one little tip about that is that since this is already popped up, you want to make sure that you're not popping it up even further. So I'm going to just take one dimensional, and rather than putting it on the back of the flower, I'm going to put it right next to the punched out label, so that I can place my flower and figure out what the best placement is, and I don't have to worry about getting it further popped up. Okay, so there we have our little flower accent over here. We've got these two little flowers. And then finally, we want the rest of our little ribbon. So the way that I do this is I then cut a piece of about 4 inches to do the tying. And that's because even though, some ribbons tie more easily than others, but I like to make sure I have it on an angle. And then you just slide it under. That's why we glued it only to the back. We didn't put any adhesive on the front, right? might have been wondering about that. And then we just tie it into a tight knot, which that is the key, is to make it tight. And then if you want to, you can trim it further, but that usually suffices for the card. So you can see that is how I made this card using the same Flowers in Bloom Designer Series paper and the Impressions Abloom bundle. So here's a simple card, and I use this card sketch, if you will, all the time, anytime that I'm looking for a quick card, because it highlights the paper so well. It's very easy to put together. You just find some coordinating ribbon, and so you could also add some gems to this if you want, and it just comes together very, very quickly. And you can make it for just about anything. So that is all I had for today. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But remember, the link to the Instagram video, and it may be elsewhere also, but that is the only place I saw it today. That is Sarah Douglas's Instagram is a Sarah thing, all one word, a Sarah thing, and but the link to it is in the description for this video. I hope you'll check it out, and if you have any comments, I'd love to see them. So, but thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.